I don't know about you, but I love starting off my day with eggs, sausage, and toast. I just tried Jones Dairy Farm's all-natural breakfast sausage, and it is delicious. They make premium crafted, all-natural meat, and 100% of products are made in the USA. And y'all, they have so many options: pork, chicken, turkey, or center-cut Canadian bacon. So check out their product finder on jonesdairyfarm.com to find out where to find Jones near you. Today on CityCast Austin, you may have heard lately that Austin's rents keep falling. But if you're a renter, that may not exactly line up with reality. So is it affordable to rent in Austin? And what rights do tenants even have? I've got an expert on today to answer all of these questions. It's Wednesday, July 9th. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here today with Shoshana Krieger, project director at Basta. Hey, Shoshana.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. So Basta is building and strengthening tenant action. It's a wonderful project with Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and we are going to talk about renting today. So in just a few years, Austin has gone from being one of the most unaffordable cities in America to seeing rents fall consistently for more than 2 years. Is Austin currently affordable for people that rent?
I would say no. I think that there's a myth right now that all of a sudden Austin is a renter's paradise. And this is one of those situations where sometimes data doesn't have the whole story, or data is only tracking certain aspects of a problem. And we love the easy answers where, oh, look, this one data source says rents are going down, so everything's great. And look, building more units. The market has magically corrected itself, and now rents are falling. But sadly, from what we see on the ground, talking to folks, that's just not the case.
Right. And Austin has recently been getting some good attention for improving affordability when it comes to housing. But what does affordable housing actually mean in Austin?
For most folks, affordable housing, quote unquote, affordable housing, capital A, where its rents are supposed to be limited, it's not really affordable. And that's largely because of changes over the decades of what qualifies as affordable housing by government standards. So back in the day in the 1930s, when public housing was really coming about, they connected rent levels to a family's income. We got to the 80s when the low-income housing tax credit program came about, and then all of a sudden we started tying rent levels to what's either called the area median income or median family income. So that's tying it to an entire region's income limits or income levels. And so when you tie rents to larger income levels, what that can do is if you start having a wage disparity and wage growth disparity, you start seeing higher incomes skyrocket while lower working class incomes remain the same. And then what happens to rents? Well, that means rents skyrocket even though wages aren't skyrocketing.
Wow.
And when we tie our rents to area median income in a city like Austin, where we have a lot of tech workers coming in. And so we have these high wages, which are skewing our area median income.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. So since the population surge we saw during COVID, Austin has been building houses like crazy. And because of that, rent prices have declined 22% since their peak in August 2023. But at the same time, according to Basta's eviction dashboard, evictions have increased 26% in the last year, and the homeless population has seen a similar increase. So can you break down what is happening like in the housing market right now? What's going on?
Well, I think it's a combination of our housing market and then poverty, right? Yes, we need to be building new units, but we need to be talking about what kinds of units we're building, what affordability levels we're building at, and especially the quality, because one of the things we've really seen is a decline in the quality of what is built. So we have to be intentional about how we are going to be building, but building alone doesn't solve that problem. And building alone isn't going to solve the larger structural problems which have emerged as a result of our housing market becoming more and more corporate, more and more globalized, where housing is seen as a product and a commodity, and how you can extract as much profit out of someone's home as possible. One other thing we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years is a real rise in junk fees. So we've seen landlords start to decouple from rent services which used to be included in rent.
I've been hearing about this. Yes.
Yeah, I saw on one tenant's ledger somewhat recently a fee for a fire hydrant.
What?
Yeah.
What?
It was something like 2 cents. Like it wasn't like this wasn't like
it doesn't matter. That's crazy.
Yes, that should be part of your rent. And then, I mean, we're seeing much more insidious fees of mandatory cable fees when people aren't even using cable, and that's $75 a month. Or valet trash fee for trash service, which doesn't even come, and that's $100 a month. Fees for amenities, which don't exist.
Wild.
Fees for paying by money order. Fees for paying by check. Fees for paying by credit card. So,
oh my God.
And when all of these fees, if you tack on the fees to rent, when we talk to a lot of tenants, they think they're coming in and, okay, it's going to be $1,400 a month. I can just swing it. But then when their bill comes in, it's $1,600.
Yeah. Man, we're getting into slumlord territory. I read something the other day that was like, she was moving into a new place and they were charging her for a ceiling fan in Texas. And she was like, I can buy my own ceiling fan and my brother can put my ceiling fan in for free. They wouldn't allow it. I did not know that these things were happening in Austin because, you know, I think I have rose-colored glasses on. I know it's not affordable here. Like I am a part of the SMART program that happens through the city. And so where I live is technically an affordable unit, right? But, you know, affordable is questionable. I mean, I'm not paying as much as everybody else is.
It could be worse.
But I'm still, for a tiny, tiny space, paying, you know, over $1,400. It's my space and I love it. And luckily I can pay for it. But like, if this is the affordable price, that leaves out so many people to have access, right? So about half of Austinites rent instead of own. I'm curious if this seems different from other cities. Is it a matter of just like, we can't afford to rent, but we sure as hell can't afford to own? Is it kind of one of those things?
Well, a lot of the issues, which I just talked about, like junk fees, that's happening throughout the country. But you do have some states and cities who are regulating junk fees in a way which Austin is not, and in some ways where Austin cannot because of preemption by the state ledge. In this moment, actually, Austin is working on an ordinance which would require disclosure of junk fees. So regulation of junk fees is probably preempted, but disclosure is not, right? And so just knowing what it is, how much you're going to pay, that is better. That is a step forward.
At least tell me.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, it seems like.
Exactly.
Yeah, first grade stuff.
And there was actually a bill in the state legislature this year, which was a disclosure of junk fees bill. There's also potentially some movement in city-funded properties regulating junk fees because they would be allowed to. So there are some, steps which Austin is taking. On your question about, is Austin unique? It does seem like, from looking at the data, that Austin has built more units than other cities. One of the things I find curious is, though, that word on the street is there's lots of vacancies. So why aren't rents going even lower? right?
Yeah.
Doesn't capitalism teach us that rents will just continue to fall? That's not happening because investors want a return on investment. Because there is a actual floor to what they will go to. That the market is not working perfectly in this way. Otherwise, we would see rents dramatically lower because we still know we see people doubled up and tripled up. So having people doubled up and tripled up and vacant units means something isn't working.
Yeah.
Right?
Something isn't working. It's like they'd rather have these empty buildings than just lower rent and make it to where more people could be there. So I'm curious, you've lived in cities like New York and LA. What kind of protections against things like this exists in those places that we just don't have here?
Oh, so many. The one which is, right, talked about the most is probably rent control. In New York City, the housing is rent stabilized. So every year there is a board, the Rent Guidelines Board, which says rents can be increased by X amount. It's not the entire housing stock. If you talk to tenant advocates there, they would say, oh my God, there's so much, we need to do.
Yeah.
LA similarly has a different version of rent stabilization. And that means that rents can only increase by a certain amount.
Love that.
That's preempted in Texas. But there's also a whole bunch of other protections which they have, which aren't as sexy, but also can really change or alter the power imbalance between landlords and tenants, which exists in both of those places, but also exists in many other cities and states in the country. So one is good cause eviction protections or non-renewal protections. So that means common sense would tell us, if you're a good tenant, you're paying your rent, you're not doing anything wrong, your landlord should have to renew your lease. Your landlord shouldn't be able to just be like, I don't like you anymore.
Exactly.
What we see is that normally when landlords don't renew your lease, there's something they didn't like that you did. And sometimes that's because you exerted your rights, right?
Yeah.
A tenant asks for repairs, landlord's I don't want to keep renewing.
Yeah.
Technically, there are protections on retaliation, but you have to prove that. It's particularly hard in Texas. And so not having good cause non-renewal protections, just that fundamentally alters the relationship between landlord and tenant and gives the landlord this power over the tenant that if the landlord just doesn't like you, they'll not renew your lease. This also exists in mobile home parks. So we're working right now at a mobile home park in the extraterritorial jurisdiction of Austin. Folks who own mobile homes and rent lots in Texas don't have these good cause protections. And so that means their biggest asset is their home. And a mobile home landlord in Texas can just, for 60 days notice, give no reason and just be like, I want you out. And it's really hard to move these mobile homes and really expensive to move them. Right? So there were 10 families who received these non-renewal notices.
Wow.
And we've seen in some parks where tenants haven't been able to sell their homes and then they have to abandon them. And then, who takes over the home and then rents it out? The landlord.
The landlord, yeah. Wow. You know Jaws, but did you know the guy who wrote it worked for LBJ first? He helped shape a presidency, then he unleashed a shark that changed movie history. This Shark Month, the LBJ Presidential Library invites you into the world of Peter Benchley, author of Jaws, Ocean Advocate, and former White House insider. Discover how he went from writing speeches from President Johnson to writing Jaws, the blockbuster that changed the ocean forever. Explore the man behind the shark and his real-life fight to protect the seas. Celebrate Shark Month in style with From the White House to the Deep Ocean. It's more than an exhibit, it's a deep dive into legacy, fear, and redemption. Dare to explore at lbjlibrary.info/Jaws. What are some rights that renters should know? Because I feel like there are common mistakes that you probably see us us Austin renters making? So what do we need to know about our rights?
Yeah. So even though I just painted a really bleak picture of renters' rights in Texas, we still have them. So some of the rights that we have right now are you have a right to repairs, and you have a right to report health and safety conditions if you're in the city of Austin to City of Austin code. If you have conditions which affect your health and safety, which are many, many conditions, it could be your carpet has a tear and then like that can become a tripping hazard, right? Like that counts. Or rats and roaches. For mold, it would be that they won't. Mold is hard. It's something we see a lot. But if it's wet, like the source mold normally comes because of water intrusion. The water intrusion would be something which would need to be fixed. So on our website, bostaaustin.org, we have templates of written repair requests, of what you can send your landlord. The process in Texas, unlike in other states, you need to put your request in writing to your landlord and either give it 2 times, it's normally around 7 days apart, or you have to send it certified for your landlord to be liable. So for your landlord to be responsible to make the repairs.
Oh, okay.
And it's important because if you don't do that, then under landlord tenant law in Texas, you might not have that right. Also, if you were to want to take your landlord to court, then you would need to have gone through that process.
Getting proof, yeah.
Yeah. And the only way you could reduce your rent because of repairs in Texas would be actually going to court, and then a judge could say you should have a reduced rent back to the day you originally submitted that written repair request. That almost never happens, but that's something which could happen.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then you also can call 311. And then the Austin Code Department should send out an inspector. And if they find a violation, then your landlord becomes ordered to fix that. And code should continue to follow up to inspect until it's fixed.
Well, that feels a little better, right? To have some sort of autonomy, some sort of action that you can do. I think sometimes it's like you ask for something to be done, or you feel like something is not being handled right as a renter, and they just wear you down. They're ignoring you, giving you the runaround, like making excuses. It just wears you down. And so many times I've just paid to have somebody come and fix it. Are there other like common mistakes that renters make?
Yeah. And I would push back and say that's not a mistake.
Okay. I feel better about that.
You're doing what makes sense for you. And there's the difference between what you have a legal right to do and what may be the perfect right thing to happen, and then what you need to do to live your life. And so no one should be beating themselves up about sometimes not exerting that right they could have exerted because they got to feed their kids, because they got to go to work, because they got their life. And this power imbalance really works to erode autonomy of people. And it also, landlords are counting on us being atomized and siloed in our little individual units and thinking, oh, this is my problem. Oh, the reason I have roaches is because I'm not keeping my house clean enough. It's my mistake. And bread and butter to what BOSTA does is we organize. So we form tenants associations at properties, get neighbors working with each other. And one of the most powerful aspects of that is in a first meeting when tenants start talking and talking about their problems, and someone says, I have rats, and someone else says, I do, and I do, and I do, and I do. And all of a sudden everyone's like, hey, this isn't my individual problem.
Yeah.
This is their problem. We're paying the rent. Right?
Why do we all have rats? Yeah.
Exactly. Why do we all have rats? And it transforms the feeling of isolation into rage. And then there's also normally some joy in it because people start laughing. Someone talks about that they named their rat, right? Like, or whatever it is.
Oh, no.
But you need joy to sustain it. When landlords see people laughing in response to something absurd they say, as opposed to cowering, and sometimes even as opposed to being angry, that can be the most disarming weapon, right?
Oh, yeah. There's nothing more off-putting than someone that's laughing at something that is not funny. It's like, oh, that person is losing it. Okay, we got to stop this immediately. Yeah, yeah. So in the latest legislative session, lawmakers passed SB 38, which is intended to help landlords more easily evict, in quotation marks to me, squatters. What is the real potential impact of this bill on Austinites?
It's not going to be good for tenants.
Yeah.
The original bill in the Senate, they called it a squatter bill. When squatter wasn't even mentioned in the language of the bill itself. And it would affect all of the renters in the entire state of Texas. In the original bill, would have allowed landlords to evict without there even being a hearing in front of a judge. There was a lot of advocacy done, and a lot of the most harmful parts of that bill for tenants were stripped away. And what was passed, it's only if you're a squatter that you may not get a hearing. But there are still some changes to landlord tenant law in Texas, which will go into effect January 1st. We're waiting on Supreme Court rules, so that's going to give us a little bit more clarity because there are also open questions about constitutionality of some of the provisions. It upends a lot of the appeals process. And so that there are a lot of changes. Also, who can serve eviction papers and writs of possession. So right now it has to be a constable.
A constable, yeah. I feel like it's always been like that, yeah.
Yeah, but that's about to change. They're about to allow off-duty law enforcement officers.
No.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare waiting to happen.
Yeah, well, and we know that a lot of security guards at apartment complexes are off-duty law enforcement officers. So oftentimes we hear threatening eviction, saying, I'm going to throw your stuff on the street. And really important right is you have a right to go before a judge before being evicted. And landlords don't like that. And the bad landlords try to...
Intimidation, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Convince tenants they don't have that right. And this opens the door of when you have potentially a employee of an apartment complex or a contractor of an apartment complex who then can actually forcibly remove tenants from their home.
Right.
And then also when you start thinking about just what's happening, throughout this country right now with ICE being masked in plain clothes, right, of like yanking folks. The bill, there was an amendment at the last minute, which is going to require some identification, but it doesn't go into details of what that identification is. So
that's the bare minimum.
Yeah, exactly. SB 38 for tenants, in retrospect, could be a lot worse. So
could be a lot worse.
But that doesn't make it good for tenants.
I'm curious, what would a renter-friendly Austin look like to you?
I think a lot of it is about... goes back to the initial part of our conversation about who owns housing.
Yeah.
And is housing a speculative product? I'm always struck sometimes when we're with tenants associations negotiating with landlords and at the negotiation table and the owner is talking and they're talking about the property. They talk about the property as an asset. They're so in that world that they can't even, when they're talking to the tenants who are living in the homes, modulate what they're saying. And that fundamentally is like the root of the problem.
The issue,
And so if you're talking about like dreaming, I think it's housing off the speculative market, right? It's about how do the people living in homes be able to have a say in their homes, to have permanency in their homes, to have a choice at permanency. Maybe the choice is that they don't want to stay forever. That's okay too. What we see is tenants go from complex to complex to complex in search of a complex, which isn't going to be as bad as the one they're in.
Yeah.
And then what does that do for our communities? Because it means that kids aren't growing up with a whole bunch of aunties and uncles who are who are the neighbors and having...
There's no village.
There's no village, right? And I remember being really struck in one conversation with a tenant. I was with him at a neighborhood association meeting, and we were going around saying our names and, why we were there. And it got to him, and he'd been living there, I think, for, I want to say like 5 or 7 years, so for a while. But he introduced himself and he said, "I'm just a lowly tenant."
What?
Yeah. And that, and obviously that's not the case. He was actually the most important person at that table. He had the most insight at that table. But it says a lot about
how you view yourself as a renter.
Exactly. And this isn't an issue of this guy's self-esteem, right? This is an issue of our culture and our narrative.
I think that it is hard for people to understand when someone does not want to own. I am not a homeowner. It has been an intentional decision throughout my life just because I have not been in a place where I can afford to own a home. I've had many conversations with people that do not understand when I say, nope, I don't want to own a house. Because for what? Like, I'm barely making it as it is as a renter. Some people just want to rent. It works better for them. And I think that we have adopted this like, well, okay, my opinion doesn't matter as much because I don't own, so I don't have as much stake. I've been a person that has used that language for sure.
Yeah, well, and I think that it's tied up into the American dream and this idea of you grow up. What you do is you grow up and you become a homeowner.
Yeah. But
there's still a very large chunk of our population who are older adults and who are renting. Mm-hmm. There's reasons why people want to own homes. It is because by design, that is how you build wealth in the U.S. And also by design, those are the opportunities that were intentionally not provided to, and at times where homes were stolen from Black folk, brown folk as well, but mostly the policies, in which we deprived wealth from Black communities we have that legacy. And so we also cannot, in decommodification conversations, just say, oh, we just decommodify and that's that, because that's not acknowledging the legacy of racism in our country, which creates the disparities in wealth and incomes across races, right? You can't just be like, oh, it's just decommodification and ignore folks who are saying, but I want a home because I want that security. We need to lean into listening and understanding what people are saying and then being like, okay, can we get to some of those interests in other ways? How are we figuring out how we're bringing more people in, as opposed to just being like, okay, you're either with me or against me on this, decommodification,
Yeah. So my last question is, if there's a person listening right now that is having issues in their apartment or as a renter, what is the first thing that they should do to address the issues?
So first thing, look at our website for educational materials. Yeah. We don't have it all, but we have some, and we also have links to other great resources. And then depending on the issue, there are free legal services available. I would also say if you're having an issue, talk to your neighbors. Obviously, it's going to depend on the issue. But if your neighbors are having the same issue, in the city of Austin, we now have a right to organize. So that means you can have meetings and your landlord shouldn't interfere. And if your landlord does, you can make a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights. If your landlord calls the cops, like happened with us, and the cops come, the cops will now say, sorry, can't do anything about it, to the manager. We don't have the laws of other states to be able to exert power. And so we need to be creative, which that can be power in numbers. And tenants associations we've worked with have gotten managers fired. And it's one small change like that can totally transform your renter experience. Going into the office and not having stress of being like, okay, there's going to be a bully. I'm gonna be bullied in front of my child.
Yeah. So organize, talk to your neighbors.
Yeah, organize, talk to your neighbors, reach out and see what other supports are available.
I love that. Shoshana, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy.
Well, thank you for having me.
Before we go, I have a little midweek mood boost for you. As if we didn't have enough reasons to love HEB, this summer they're continuing their summer concert series, True Texas Tunes, inside the Lake Austin HEB's True Texas Barbecue Restaurant. Now, this series is a partnership with the nonprofit Housing Opportunities for Musicians and Entertainers, or HOME. HOME was founded in 2017, and it raises money through concerts to cover housing and healthcare costs for aging musicians. And today, the volunteer-based organization assists 35 musicians monthly and has awarded over 200 emergency grants. So catch True Texas Tunes every Wednesday until August 27th at the Lake Austin HEB for live music and barbecue from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. And, as always, shout out to HEB for always showing up for Central Texas and beyond. We know they're also helping out with flood relief right now. So, we just love them and we feel lucky to call them our hometown grocery store. That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find links to Basta's website in our show notes. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.